shall punish Leviathan, that great and mighty sword shall punish Leviathan, that crooked serpent, and he shall slay that crooked serpent, and he shall slay the dragon that is in the sea. In that day, sing ye to her a vineyard of red wine.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. It's a long fade on that. All right, we're continuing in the book of Isaiah. We're at the end of chapter 26 with a very interesting passage about the, talking about the dead living again. And, and if, sometimes I think the way I read through it could be kind of confusing because I give multiple ideas of what it might mean or different parts because I'm not selling I don't have a slate of doctrine I'm here to sell per se. I don't. I mean, I think it's important that we emphasize the things that are most true and that are the most important truths. Those are the things we emphasize and we must get right. And like I said, you can get the passage wrong, but still get the doctrine right. That's important. It's better to have your doctrine right than the precise meaning of any particular, because some people might say, well, no, Paul, I don't agree, because actually, man should not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. But again, I would say that knowing the true nature of what God has to say in a general sense is better than specifically knowing one tiny little part of one thing that has been said, that is correct. And you could say, well, if we get it all correct, then we get it all correct. I mean, great. That's a great goal. I am in favor of getting everything correct. But it is a challenge. It's not something, I mean, there's denominations, right? Like the Lutherans, the Presbyterians, the Catholics, the Pentecostal variations and stuff. You get all this stuff. You even get stuff that goes back. You get the Nestorians, the Armenians. I mean, they have an older history of Christianity. The Greek Orthodox goes back, but they all disagree at some point. Critical enough that they divided from each other. Personally, I think the church is too centrally controlled, or was. And never the bringing it under of a bureaucracy, almost like a bureaucratic type thing, was probably not a good idea. And if you look at the scriptures, there's no real superstructure for the church. It's all local. It's all the local bishops. And Paul kind of goes around just because he's appointed by God and is sort of like giving everyone advice on everything. But there's no clear chain of authority beyond, going straight to God basically, and then the next guy down. And it's always kind of been that way. And from the days of the judges and all that stuff, before they had a king, the desire to have men over us has always had an impact in a particular direction and not very positive. I mean, there are positives to it. That's why they wanted a king. Give us a king so we can be like the other nations. Give a man you can look to. Other lords have ruled over us, it said. We can have a lord we can look to. To be almost like God. Not God. We won't look to him as God, but he's kind of like the big, powerful man. And there's a benefit to having a leader. It allows you to move as one, and it gives the nation like one will. Essentially, at a certain level, all the will of the nation can be brought to a point most effectively. If you don't have if it's all being done, the Lord can be just as effective and even more so. But the problem is people can't look at him. They can't have that assurance because it feels more secure knowing, like, well, I see a man there, rather than oh, I believe the Lord will take care of things. You know, that's not always. I mean, people have a lot of faith, and for some people, that's good enough. You know, when you have faith, but also sometimes, you know, people that there's doubt. Men have it. You know, even the apostles showed doubts. Peter, walking on the water. Walking on the water. I've never walked on water. I received the Holy Spirit in a way that I thought was impressive, and that's lasted for years. You know, can you imagine how much faith you would gain from walking on water just once? I would think it would be huge. You know, but yet, if he could doubt, then I assume it's in me too, because I'm not the most credulous person. I was as a child, I think, but I grew up. Credulous meaning I have having a tendency to believe. I don't want to call myself unbelieving, because that's not so. We all are believing in one capacity or another, and also unbelieving and doubting. And doubt and confidence are kind of like the measures of the strength of either side of that question. And I was going into that. Well, it's an important aside. Doctrinally, yeah, because of going. Well, maybe it means this, maybe it means that. I don't mean to confuse. You know, I have one perspective on the resurrection. You know, Jesus died and rose again. And because he died and rose again, those who have faith in him will rise again at his coming. And that means, in a practical sense, where some people might differ at the sequence and so on at the end when this actually happens. But basically, at the end of the world, after all the tribulations are done, or at the peak of it actually, and the wrath of God is poured out, Jesus appears and destroys the Antichrist and the army that's gathered together against him in Armageddon. The pretty much simultaneous to that, as far as I know, or just prior, but all about the same time, the dead in Christ rise, and then those who are alive and remain are caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. Right? Now the rest of the dead live not again till the 1,000 years are finished. That's the beginning of the 1,000 years. That's the way I see that. Some people differ on the millennium, and also that some people have a rapture in there, which is wrong. But it's not. It's it's just wrong. It's just wrong. Believe me, we're not going anywhere. It's so wrong-headed in so many ways, and you've been led astray on that point. But let's not get too caught up in it. It's not like an emergency. It isn't, because if you got to that point with me, we're probably just fine, as far as I'm concerned. It's like the resurrection is of the body. Some people deny it. I didn't realize how important it was when I was young. I didn't even get it. I sort of was like, because I was like, of course you have some sort of body, and that's the thing, is like there is some sort of body, but on the other hand, if you listen carefully, sometimes it's like, no, not that body. Not the one that shall be, but the one that shall. It is a confusing subject in some ways, because obviously Jesus Christ, when he rose from the dead, there was something different about him. He appeared in the middle. He was doing things he hadn't done, at least not very frequently, except, on the Mount of Transfiguration. But generally speaking, as he walked about, he was with them differently before the resurrection than he was after. And also some differences. I'm trying to think, though. It's like, he's sitting in heaven. I think the Transfiguration was meant to be like a preview of that. I have my glasses. One of those days where I should probably put it away. I'll put on my nice bifocals. So if I have to read anything and these don't hurt. Oh, my nose feels better already. Yeah. So let's go in Isaiah 26 again. But the resurrection was the thing here. And, when I look at the passage, I'm just trying to understand what it means. Awake and sing, ye that dwell in the dust. I mean, what was meant when it was written. I mean, that's the idea. For thy dew is as the dew of herbs, and the earth shall cast out the dead. I was going to mention, I did not really comment on the last clause there, right? Oh, it was the part. I remember the part about falling. I could not sort out precisely if I should heed the translators who seem to think that is a positive. The inhabitants of the world have not given, because it says we have not delivered, and they have not fallen. It might be a play on words, though. The idea that falling in birth, meaning is kind of similar to, meaning the child comes from the womb and he falls out, essentially. I mean, in a crude way of putting it. And you could, and in a sense, you could use that to combine and make a word where it makes sense. But also you could do a play on the word where fallen also can imply born, or like in a sense of fallen from grace, or fallen down into hell. So is actually the precise position I was thinking of. They have not fallen into that was one thought. Let's go back to 20. That's where we are. I don't want to break. The wake and sing you that do well in the dust. Obviously, you come alive, you sing again. But thy dew is as the dew of herbs. I like that because it's a metaphor, obviously. Well, it's a metaphor combined with a simile. Thy dew, your dew. What dew is the fresh, water condensation that forms on vegetation in the morning, and it represents a lot of things like purity, because the water that forms in the dew is, well, it always seems like a pure. When you see the dew in that, it seems like a very fresh thing. I'd love to go out and pick a head of lettuce that was just wet with dew, and shake it off and just bite into it. May pour some vinegar and oil right on it, or nothing. I wish I could say nothing, but pour some salad dressing and have a bite. But I could almost eat it raw, though, thinking of with the dew on it. I think the idea is it's like fresh. You know what I mean? They're not coming out of the grave like zombies. They're coming out fresh, like the morning dew. Your dew, where that's the metaphor, is like, similarly, the dew of herbs. Because obviously the dead don't have any dew, except in a metaphorical sense. Come, my people, enter into thy chambers, and shut thy doors about thee. Hide thyself, as it were, for a little moment, until the indignation be overpast. A very important verse for those of you who are afraid of the end times, who need the rapture. Look at this. That's the way I always thought of this. When the God's wrath is poured out, it's like, come, my people, enter into thy chambers. Shut the doors about thee. Hide thyself, as it were, for a little moment, until the indignation be overpast. Because the Lord is coming out of his place to punish the inhabitants of the earth for their iniquity. The earth also shall disclose her blood, and no more cover her slain. We'll talk about that in a second. See what I'm saying, though? But there is an idea that in the midst of the wrath of God, you have protection. It says, 1,000 shall fall at your side, but it will not come near you. What about the plagues of Egypt? Did they have to leave Egypt to not be part of the plagues? No. It just didn't affect them. The plagues of God don't affect the people of God. And when they put the lamb's blood over the lintels of their doors, the death angel would pass over them. So we have nothing to fear, as long as we understand that everything can happen to us. You know what I mean? Because I also, as I read that, I thought of another way of looking at this. Come, my people, enter into thy chambers could mean, and I'm just this is a suggestion, because it just occurred to me. Because I was just thought of it in terms of the wedding chamber. I felt like the sense of hide thyself for a little moment, shut the door. It's like, and when you come out, it's all over. Okay. And I guess for some people, they may think that's like, that almost sounds like the rapture. Sure. It could also mean death. The chambers could be the chambers of the dead. And it could refer to the fact that I always suspect that when you die, I mean, even though I believe the dead do not rise till the last day, as the scriptures teach, and certainly strongly suggest, even though that's what I believe, I do believe also that the perception of someone who dies is the next moment. It'll be like just a moment. You know, you're there, you are, and the wicked are surrounding you, and they've got blood on their minds, and they take you and with cruel hands kill you. You know? And you're like, man, Lord, you're dead. But the next instant you're alive, and the wicked are being punished. That's how you experience. That's actually how death is experienced by a believer. It's just a little moment, just as if a little moment. The lights go out and then they come back on. It's like, close the closet, open the closet, and there we are. And it's because the reason it occurred to me, I don't think that's what Isaiah was talking about. I don't think he was talking about death. But I think of it. But I'm listening to it, and I'm like, well, you know, I'm safe in the grave. It's not like the Lord's going to lose track of me there. I don't, you know, and the old heathens used to cut people's heads off and, you know, try to screw up their resurrection, but God knows the address of everything. It doesn't matter. It's not about the particles per se, because, you know, your body exchanges particles. It's about though my body be eaten by beasts and torn and brought about to the far ends of the earth, from thence and beyond, you know, the Lord just takes the idea of me and just makes me out of the dust. Again, it'll be a flesh and blood body, the same flesh and blood body. It won't be made out of the same molecules per se. They're off somewhere else. They're doing other things. I mean, they could come back, but we've shared molecules. I might have the same carbon atoms in me that other humans, you know, I mean, gee, you know, it only takes a couple worms in the graveyard getting eaten by birds, getting eaten by dogs, getting eaten by lions or whatever, dying, and then turning into the grass, and then the carbon's all floating around everywhere. And I was going to say I might have the carbon in me. I was going to pick up a famous historical figure, but I hate when people do that, because it's like the reincarnation thing where, you know, you ever notice they're always descended from somebody famous. It's like, oh, you're descended from Cleopatra. Oh, you're a descendant of Julius Caesar. Oh, you're a descendant of Genghis Khan, or these pick, you know, Mark Antony, or somebody who sounds a little more cool. You know, to be oh, I'm the reincarnation of that. But in a sense, the funny thing is the carnal part gets redone, meaning bodies get returned to the ground. The dust returns to the ground from whence it was taken, as the Lord himself says. Dust thou art, and to dust thou shalt return. You know, that's what we are. And so of the dust we come forth, because I am not just these particles in motion and tied together by electrical charges. I'm an idea. I'm God's idea of a human being, of what a human being is, a particular one, me. You know? And so are all of you. Each of you is an idea of a person. You are a bringing together of a lot of molecules, but there's a lot of information there about you. Like in your genetics, in your mind, in all that information. It's like the only one who knows it is God. The only one who can bring you back is God. The only hope you have is God. That there is some, you know, because all this information, all your life, you know, that's why people think, hey, you know what, I can get away with things by doing them in secret because no one can see, because they don't believe in God. And such people are dangerous. You know, you understand and let me tell you something else. The people who believe in God are also dangerous. So I'm not saying like, oh, we're perfectly harmless. No, we're dangerous. All kinds of people are dangerous when they have a strong conviction on something, for sure. if you have a strong conviction that there is no God and you can do whatever you want, and if that's a perverse urge, a sociopathic urge, and you have a psychopathic personality, those people often get away with a lot of murder, because murder can be done in this world. It happens, and people who have, I was going to say no soul. Of course they got a soul, but who have almost like this predatory-like ability to, not care at all, they can get away with things because the world isn't set up to accommodate such abnormal things. We can't live our lives as if we have to stop, everyone from becoming that. That's why, it's good. It is on a practical sense, it's good for people to believe in God, because people who don't will believe in anything. It's true. Who know? Because it's part of, like, I did that video about racism and stuff. It's like the reason they have these almost religious feeling to the things going on in the world today, to their fervor and stuff, is because they need some sort of God. They have to have one. They've taken away the Christian God, and now people are looking for something else. And they find it. And some people say, no, it's like, no, you're the minority who think, the atheists who think, like, nobody needs God, I don't. It's like, okay, we'll argue about you later, but you're not the majority. And if you think if you think the majority of people are as smart as you, then you're a rare bird, because most people think they're smarter than average, which of course is impossible. Most people cannot be smarter than average. And that's what most people think. And so what? Because that's what the thing is. When it comes down, when you get all carnal and you leave God out of it, then you got to have people be smart, right? But that doesn't work either, because a lot of smart people believe in God. A lot of them do, A lot of people are a lot smarter than me, That's for sure. And I'm it's funny, like when I say I'm smart, it's like, because I don't say it because I think so. I'm saying it because they told me that. It was in the 98th, 9, 97, and different educational things in the percentiles of the testing when I was a child. And that, what, other people have done more with their minds and expanded them better, probably, But the thing is, when I look at that, it's like, say I'm in the top 3%. That means in the world, there's like hundreds of millions of people smarter than me. You know what I mean? If I'm in the top 3% of intelligence, just raw intelligence, I don't think I'm the top 3% of smartest people, that's for sure. I just mean like power, a basic horsepower brain. It's like there's hundreds of millions. I might have done the math wrong. Let's see, 1 billion. No, I meant tens of millions. Sorry, tens of millions. Specifically, if you're the top 1% intelligent, if you're like at the, if you're right there, that would be what? Is it 7 billion people in the world now, or is it 8? I forget. 7. Let's just say 7. That's like 70 million people are smarter than you at 1%. And by the time you get, I said hundreds. I was giving myself like 97%. And that's maybe a bit generous, but that's what it said on the tests, And that's why I go by. It's not to my own. It's what they told me, But here's the thing: it's like I know I'm also smart enough to realize. Like I said, I know I'm not that bright. You know what I mean? There is a lot smarter one could be. I can see that because when you observe the really smart people, you're like, that's a really smart person. You just listen to a length of time, and you're like, I might have some crippling issues with like short-term memory. Because sometimes when I get, I think I see other people who don't get lost like I do. That's the thing. It's like that may dumb me down quite a bit. It's all right. That's the thing. But with God, you don't have to be the smartest. The race is not always to the swiftest. That's I forget that's the Proverbs. That's Ecclesiastes, I think. Because the race does not always go to the swift person. The fastest guy does not always win the race. He just doesn't. Maybe he stumbles out the gate. There's all kinds of stuff that happens. Maybe the other guy just has a moment of adrenal overload. There's all kinds of ways, or just the wind of the Lord at his back. I don't know. Because that's the thing. It's like sometimes you just can't account for why it doesn't turn out the way it's supposed to. It's like, otherwise, why would anyone ever bet on a horse race? Should be able to predict exactly which horse is going to win. Why not? Because there's a lot more to it than just raw horsepower. Because it's funny, I used that for brain power before horsepower came around. So we can hide ourselves in a number of ways. But I also think of it in terms of this, that there are those who are alive and remain to the coming of the Lord. And none of the things that happen, because none of the things that happen in the tribulation, in the natural sense, anything that would be considered the wrath of God or a punishment, none of those things will hurt any believers. Men were scorched with great heat and blaspheme in the name of God. That's not going to happen to you. Even if you're right there, you'll watch them do it. There will be some of us slain. It says explicitly the 2 witnesses will be slain. And I've talked about the 2 witnesses extensively on many things. Just look at my study on the 2 witnesses in Revelation. It's just chapter 11. But there's important, because there's a lot of connective tissue there. I don't want to go into it. But the point is, they're slain. And that those figures in that prophecy may symbolize a lot of believers, actually, is what I think. It's not just 2 individuals, but pairs of individuals all over the world. And so, hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands and thousands, maybe tens of thousands. But they're not going to kill all of us, obviously, because Christians are actually in the billions. But then again, there's the great whore. So how many, 5 out of 7 Christians are going to go to the Antichrist? I don't know. I mean, that's just 5 out of 7 churches, but there's no relative sizes given. It's not like I can tell. And for some people, they think of each church in the book of Revelation as a church age, which I don't buy, because throughout the ages, the church has been so separated that how can you really quantify what the whole thing is going through? And if it was the whole thing, then you're essentially saying God's holy church is corrupt. And like all those, like that at a time the whole thing was bad. I guess, I don't know, because I always think of that the true church is the body of Christ in a mystical sense, not so much in the sense of the organization of the Catholics or the Protestants or the fundamentalists or the whatever, the Baptists or whatever. It's not the organizations. Now, if you're going to look at it organization by organization, that's why I like to say the 7 churches. Okay, you can look at an individual church and say, yeah, that kind of reminds me of Sardis, or this one reminds me of Thyatira. But, granted, I don't know that works much better. Maybe it's something that is best observed at that time. And if we find ourselves having difficulty cramming our current situation into the biblical narrative, or cramming the biblical narrative into our current situation, if we find that that's difficult, maybe it's because the current situation is not the end times. But, like I've been saying a lot the past year, it's like, I just watched a video about gay people singing about coming for your children. It makes me feel a little bit like embarrassed for ever having been even a little tolerant in a way. Because I feel like, oh, okay. So me being tolerant of you is not appreciated, apparently. Because as I say, oh, we'll make your kids tolerant and fair. It's like, wait a second. We haven't been tolerating you? The lesson I learned from Sodom and Gomorrah is that these people eventually lead us to ultimate destruction. And so the penalties imposed in the Old Testament for doing those sins were pretty severe. Now, to the degree that we tolerate it, because, hey, it's not something that if you're keeping it, I don't want to go barging in anyone's house and try to figure out what they're doing in their bedroom, who they're living with, who they're loving with. I don't consider it my business at all. You know what I mean? But when you come pounding on my door and saying, where are your children? Then I think like, why did we ever put up with you? It's like, go back and, maybe we should get in the time machine and go back and warn everybody. Because I'll tell you what, people are not going to be too pleased with that. A great majority. I can't, it's too creepy. It's like, oh. I mean, and I know they meant it as a joke. They just don't get it. It's like, no, we get it. We get your joke. It's like, but you don't understand. We understand. That's what we don't want. Because it's like, everybody tolerates or intolerates one thing or the other. You know what I mean? There are things I don't tolerate. And I see there's things that the world doesn't want to tolerate. It doesn't want to tolerate our religious freedom. Or our religion at all. And that gets me excited because I'm like, now we have a fight I can get my teeth into. Because I never really got into it before because it was all political. But if you want to come after me on those grounds, they will. It just seems, it's like, wow, I don't know. Because it's like, who knows what, I don't mean they, them. I don't mean that. I just mean like this, the whole, no one's coming after me or anything like that. But I'm just saying, but mentally it draws me. It draws me because you draw me into the fray. Because now I care. You know what I mean? It's like, oh. Because, and also, honestly, when someone's actually just looking to be tolerated, it's very hard to fight that. I don't know why we would. To me, it seems a very Christian thing to tolerate other people, to put up with one another. It even says so in the scripture. Even if they're not a believer, to try to put up with, as much as it is possible, to live peaceably with all men. And then not seek the destruction of other people because of their sins and so on and so forth. I certainly believe in that. And still do, always will. But, but there has to be a certain level of understanding that's like, if you're going to be tolerated, you got to be tolerant in return. And people that think you are sinful, you got to tolerate that. And if you won't tolerate it, you should not expect to be tolerated. You know what I mean? I don't want anyone to hurt anybody. I want to live peaceably. But if people come with violence against me, well, the Lord will have something to say. I have no doubt. Especially for righteousness. It's like, look I've been in trouble for being bad. And you know what? I was bad. I'm a bad man. I'm not all good. You know what I mean? And I submit myself for all the bad things I've done. I know the Lord sees all. The Lord sees all. And that's at one point terrifying, but also so utterly reassuring. I'm glad that I find it reassuring. I could find it. It is terrifying on a certain level, and I know the terror of the Lord. But it's more reassuring because, like I said, it's like nobody knows me except Him. My wife kind of knows me, but she doesn't have the power to raise me from the dead. So the people who know me intimately are all powerless. I mean, there's nobody recording my life, and that my works should not perish. The world could take my website, they could wipe it out. They could find every hard drive that ever had my music on it and destroy it. They could take me down from all the websites. They could scrub the internet. They could use content, the same content ID they used to identify my song. They identify my music and they put an ad on it, right? Because they're like, that's one of those songs that we're publishing for Paul Strangini, and we could put an ad there, right? But if they wanted to, they could use the same content ID to make sure to scrub the internet. Oh, there it is again. Delete. There it is again. We found another one. Delete. They could find that content everywhere it is. That which they used to make money and promote you, they can use to destroy you. The world could destroy me. Wipe me out. They would do that in the Soviet Union. They would literally erase people from pictures. They would have people go in and doctor the pictures. This is before Photoshop. I mean, photo is before the computer. Using the old techniques, I guess. I don't know. Those old techniques. I don't know. But, they would erase people. They have that impulse. Get rid of them. Get rid of their ideas. If you have too many inconvenient ideas, they want to get rid of you. They don't want to tolerate you. See, they're tolerant of all their sexual deviancy. But when it comes to tolerating ideas that differ from theirs, they're not tolerant at all. And so if they're going to be that way, they have no right to expect to be tolerated. If they're going to be intolerant, they have no, that's the thing. It's like they want to be tolerated. It's like we've been tolerating. When was the last time you heard of a gay lynching? I've never heard of such a thing. The only time I ever heard of such a thing was like there's like a hate crime described at the beginning of It, I think. It's like, but actually it ends up being the monster kills the gay guy, not the guys who are like chasing him. Or what? No, yeah, the monster kills the bad guy, not the. I forget how it goes. There's some weird thing at the beginning of that book. I read it when I was a teenager. I just remember that because it was because the kind of seedy nature. His books are seedy garbage trash, by the way. You're welcome. Shut the doors about the hide thyself as it were for a little moment until the indignation be overpast. He's a good writer, though. For behold, the Lord cometh out of his place to punish the inhabitants of the earth for their iniquity. The earth also shall disclose her blood and shall no more cover her slain. I know people have been persecuted over time. Certainly. And again, I'm against that. I don't think people should be persecuted. But again, here's the thing. You get all loud and proud and start getting intolerant and shaking yourself, shaking your rear end in the streets. I'm not for that. And I know a lot of people aren't. They start singing about taking people's children. Well, I don't know. What do you want? You really want a backlash, huh? That's what it seems like to me. God's wrath is coming on the world, and I want it to pass me over. That's the thing. Until the indignation be overpassed. That was how this whole thing started. It's like the wrath of God. You can stand in the midst of it, and it's not going to hurt you. I remember I was talking about the seals. Yeah. Well, when you look at the things like that, but the two witnesses, there is a possibility of death. But it will not be at God's hand. It'll be at the hand of the enemies. And that's a glorious death. To be slain by my enemies, that's why I was talking about that stuff, because I'm like, this whole year I've been like starting to write songs, which I've never done before. I always wrote music for the Bible. And I didn't really write songs except for goofy stuff, just for fun. I never was seriously writing. And it's because of the events of the past year, which drew me in. And, because it requires some events. Otherwise, why not just emphasize the things that we already know? Because I don't have any, and when the world's at peace and everything is generally okay, there are no prophets. There's nothing to do. There's nothing to say. Except what has already been said by the prophets of old, to repeat it over and over again. Because the world doesn't want to listen. But they will listen. When they shall not, but they shall see. And be ashamed for their envy at the people. Remember we were talking about that? The poured out prayer, let's see. What's the verse? Oh, wait. What verse am I thinking of? Maybe it's back a bit more. There we go, yeah. Let favor be shown to the wicked, yeah. When thy hand is lifted up, they will not see, but they shall see. You know, it's like God's hand is lifted up. His hand is stretched out in judgment, up. You know, I'm not sure exactly what the configuration is, but it's lifted up to do justice. Right? And the wicked don't see it. They don't realize he's poised, ready to smite. Everyone likes that word. To smite. I gotta make sure I include the word smite in my song when Father swings his mighty fist. I gotta have a smite in there. Or smote. He smote them with his fist. They will not see. They won't notice the fact that he's poised, but they shall see. Meaning, yeah, when he lets loose, and they will know shame at that time. The fire of thine enemies shall devour them. That is a play on the idea of, again, the wicked is, are caught in the snare that they intended for others. They have fire. Their fire. And by their fire, they mean to burn us. But their fire shall devour them. There's another place where it's like, your words like fire shall go out of you and devour you. That's what the wicked do themselves. Because out of their mouths, they condemn themselves. They do their own destruction. Like they think, oh, I'll sing about taking the children. It'll be so funny. It'll be so funny. Because I'm just talking about teaching them to be tolerant. Like, and wait, if you weren't tolerated, you wouldn't feel comfortable making that video. You're more than tolerated. You're celebrated. And you think you can get away with it. Maybe they can't. Maybe they're right. Wouldn't that be funny? They get away with it. I think they will, actually. I mean, as far as, I don't think there's going to be any big... What is anyone going to do about it? They wrote the song. Well, it'll make some minds turn a bit. It should. It should. When they directly target Christians, because in the song they're directly pointing at Christians and saying, we're targeting your children. That's what they said. You say we're sinners. It's very obvious who they're talking to. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just look up gay agenda and then, something that came out yesterday. Everyone heard about it. But, obviously they're not. What they mean is they got their tongue in their cheek, haha, we're coming for your children. They don't really mean that, but they do mean it. What they mean is we're going to teach them to be how we think they should be. They're not going to call us sinners anymore. See that? You're going to change the definition. That's one thing I say. We don't take sins off the books. I tolerate things like homosexuality. I'm very tolerant of it. I think so. I'm not... I don't know. I never liked the phobia. They talk homophobia. It's I always thought of it like that people were afraid that they were gay, and so they'd get really weird about gay people. Like, oh, not me, man. I'm a guy. I like girl. Protesting about it a lot. I've never been a big. I'm like, oh yeah, it's I know they're weird. They act weird sometimes. Not all of them, but there's that guy in high school who you thought was gay, who totally was gay. Back when I was a kid, there was no gay people. It was whispered about sometimes. In fact, there were no gay guys in my school. Ha ha ha. But I mean, of course there were. But I'm just saying, I know now because they're out and you look back and you're like, of course. But there were whispers about certain people. I never cared. I never even thought about it. But I wasn't particularly religious at the time either, honestly, to tell you the truth. I was more, whatever. I was like, those were just guys I didn't have to compete with for the attention of the girls. As far as I'm concerned, good. Good riddance. Those guys, there weren't any popular guys that were accused of that, I'll tell you that. All right, so, anyways, the Lord's coming out of his place. He's hidden. The world seeth him not. He will punish the inhabitants of the earth for their iniquity. See, there's the thing. I tolerate sin because God's going to punish it. I don't take the punishment in my hands. But I will tell you, I scheduled the release of 2 songs. They're both coming out on July 23rd. One's called Hell is the Place. Hell is the place where traitors, liars, adulterers, and unbelievers dwell, and homosexuals. Just so you know. That hasn't changed. It's like that behavior is sinful, and yes, it ends in death. Period. In the second death, which I don't think is tormented forever and ever, anyways. But but I don't mind in the song. Well, whatever, you'll see when it comes out. But like that hasn't changed. I still believe that. I will certainly continue to teach it. And I will teach it to children. See, Johnny? Those homosexuals, they're going to burn in hell. That's the way it is. That is the teaching. That's what we believe. Now, that doesn't mean, I don't think, why would they get angry? That liar over there, he's going to burn in hell. That fornicator, that adulterer, all that. I've always put them in the same, you know what I mean? A lying tongue is an abomination unto the Lord. I've always properly quantified everything. I don't elevate, because it's so easy to just pick on. That's why someone comes to me and says, hey, let's make a shirt against this group or against the other. And I'm like, no, I'm not picking on individual sins, especially ones that I have never experienced. And then, make that the sin of sins. I can't think of more hypocritical activity than to just harp on something that I have no, because, I don't have a gay bone in my body, so let's go after the gays. It's like, because God forbid we should go after the liars. God forbid we should go after, anything else, fornicators, drunkards. God forbid we go after, let's go after the people who we have a smallest minority of. Let's go after the gays. Oh, no, let's go after the pedophiles. That's a really small minority that everybody hates. And with good reason. Because it's like, they go after you. People who target your children are become an immediate threat. And if they don't understand that by targeting people's children, they're making themselves threatening, and the implicit threat is taken as explicit. Meaning it's like, there's an implicit threat. It's actually quite explicit. And it's like, you still go to hell, and I still teach my children right from wrong. Okay? But you can live your life. I will tell my children that, all sinners are worthy of Christ's forgiveness if they will turn to him. And there's no sin that is too, grotesque or somehow perverted that God cannot forgive and, let us be new again. I don't know what to do. I understand that it's not something anyone chooses, by the way. I do understand that you don't choose to be gay. Because otherwise, I could have chosen it. And there's a part of my life where I think I might have. If I could. If I could have found men attractive instead of women, it would have been so much easier. Because girls are complicated and different from men. And so it takes a different kind of... It's a very, maybe if I had had a better relationship with my mother, I would know more. Would have had a better grip on what women were. Or a more realistic grip on what, the variations. It's not the nature of a relationship. This is a different kind of, very unusual person. Let's just put it that way. Didn't learn a lot of useful information. Well, I did learn a lot of useful information, actually, when I think about it. But I'm not going to say exactly what that information was for the sake of peace. For behold, the Lord cometh out to punish the... Okay. All right. So, God will punish the world for their iniquity. The earth is going to disclose her blood, meaning the guilt. Just like in the Garden of Eden, just after the Garden of Eden, Cain and Abel, when the Lord says to Cain, the blood of your brother Abel cries to me from the ground. It's that idea that the murder, it's a metaphor of that. Because obviously blood doesn't cry out, but it does in a sense, right? Because he knows about it. He knows about the event, and to him, it's like a big red flag. It's like in life. There's some things that are more important than others. There's some things that it's crying out for vengeance. It's crying out for attention. We give that personification to something that seems important to us, and something that seemed important to God was Abel being dead. He knew about that. And the blood of all the slain that the world has done, it's all crying out to God all the time. It even says in the book of Revelation, under the altar there, in front of him, at least symbolically, is under that altar are all these souls of the slain. And I think that has to be symbolic, because think about it. If you're dead and slain, you're going to just spend your whole, however much time there is from when you die till the resurrection, and you got to go back and get your body or whatever nonsense they teach. You're going to spend all that time literally under a big altar screaming. That sounds like hell. It sounds like hell. It sounds like a big waiting room with a lot of other uncomfortable people crammed into a small space. Because if you take it literally, right? But I don't take it literal. I take it literal in a spiritual sense. Yeah, the souls are under the altar. What's a soul like? You know what I mean? The souls cry out to God. To me, I could be asleep and my soul is crying out to God. That's not a tall order. Yeah, 27 is a new chapter, but it is still, it's like, doesn't it, in that day does not always designate it's definitely connective tissue. In that day, what day? Well, what we've been talking about. The day that the Lord punishes the inhabitants of the earth for their iniquity. The day that the earth discloses her blood and shows, disclose her blood is like, all the people unsolved murders. I've seen a lot of that stuff. Unsolved murder. I hate that stuff, but I like to be reminded of how dark and evil the world is, so I can appreciate my blessings and the peace that God has given me for as long as I shall have it. And when I lose it, I can remember that, I had peace for a while and the Lord was good to me, and if I receive good at his hand, I also must receive any evil. Just as Job, because it's not, the evil is not like God doing bad to me, but he may appoint, like the cross for Christ. Evil came upon him. The cross was an evil thing. It's being crucified. In that sense, it was a calamity. For him personally. For his body, it was a calamity. You know what I mean? But for us, it was salvation. And that contrast is part of it. I mean, that's the point. That it was a sacrifice. He had to die. Death is an evil. Jesus died. But that evil turned to good. Because he who died was Lord of all, for whom there was no punishment due, but who took on himself all our sin. But all the little hidden nuggets of evil in the world are getting exposed. And everyone shall answer for all the wicked they've done. And that day the Lord with his sore and great and strong sword shall punish Leviathan, the piercing serpent, even Leviathan, that crooked serpent, and he shall slay the dragon that is in the sea. The serpent. Again, Revelation. I see so much connective tissue between Revelation and Isaiah as we go constantly. It's just constantly, and because why not? I'm going to look at that prophecy and understand. And this is the thing, is like, that's what the Old Testament prophets can do for you. If you know your prophets from the Old Testament and the New, knowing both of them is the key to when you know both, you get a much clearer picture. I have definitely weak. Isaiah is one of my strongest points in the Old Testament, which is why I chose it as a big book to do, because it's something I'm very familiar with. But there are other ones like, if we do Ezekiel, we will eventually, I no doubt. But it's like, that's the one I've always struggled with. Okay, so the serpent, again, in Revelation, there have a vision in chapter 12 of a woman and a dragon, right? And the dragon is ready to devour the child as soon as it is born. And she's bringing forth a man-child, and the dragon is ready to eat it. We were just talking about that, the pregnancy thing. So like I said, plugging it in, that's the thing, it's plugging in, it's like, who's pregnant, what, because there is different things referring to the same thing. Like there's a heavenly Jerusalem and there's an evil Jerusalem that's not even called Jerusalem, it's called Babylon. It may physically be at Jerusalem, though. And I think that for specific reasons, because the two witnesses lay in the streets of that city, which is called Sodom and Egypt, where also our Lord was crucified. So here's the thing, because they called Jerusalem, Sodom, and Egypt, that sort of, to me, like, lets me know, it's like, yes, you know what? It can be an evil city. It is Sodom. Just like in Isaiah, he was comparing it to Sodom. Just like in Isaiah, he was comparing it to Egypt. And also, the unspoken part is Babylon. The prophet isn't going to spell everything out. That city, which is called Sodom and Egypt, and other things too. Do I have to spell out? That's one of those places where you could indeed do, as I often caution against, read between the lines and see that it is not just, it doesn't specify Babylon, but by the fact that it's saying Sodom, Egypt, Babylon, Rome, Jerusalem, because that's where he was crucified. Jerusalem. And that's where it says the Antichrist is going to show himself to be God. It says they worship the dragon, which gave power to the beast. And they worship the beast. And he's going to say, where I will send into heaven in the sides of the north. He's going to show that he is God. What better place to do that from Jerusalem? What better place than to sort out the differences between the Muslims and the Jews? Perhaps. If those differences still exist when the Antichrist comes. But I mean, the Antichrist is obviously going to have to solve some really big problems because he's going to be worshipped as God. But then again, they could just BS us into saying he's... After this year, and the way I look, the way they fawn over Lord Biden, though they almost can't, because it's like, it's too ridiculous. And he's not, people act like he's this doddering old man, which he's not quite. But he's definitely not, I almost feel bad for our president because he was never the sharpest pencil. And he is a little dull with age, A little dull with age. And people look at that and they look at his signs. It's like, yes, it is a decline. It is a decline, of course. Still mostly there, though. What frightens me is that the world leaders would look at him and think he's weak because he's like that. But I don't really think he is. And certainly, as far as he seems very inclined to go to war. And I really don't think our nation should be going to war. But I do think there are forces at work that want us to go to war. Which is terrible. Because that's one thing we just had a fake pandemic and we depleted all our money fighting a paper tiger, essentially. Because it was not, we didn't really fight anything. We just flailed around and hurt ourselves, and the disease ran its course. Not entirely, but whatever. I don't want to talk about that anymore. I get so sick of the corona garbage. Every time they talk about some new variant, I want to kick the radio. It's like, oh God, it's like, how come what about whatever. But here again, we have this in the book of Isaiah. We have the serpent presented, just as in Revelation. Piercing, I had in my thing, fugitive, as darting here and there, I believe, was the idea. I almost regret that we're, like, I literally feel like I just want to keep going, because we just got to chapter 27, did verse 1. There's so much more. I'm not really trying to do this stream thing. I'm trying to get here. Right? Well, let's just look a little here. We're going to wrap it up, and that's cool. We'll start on verse 2 on Monday, and I'm going to mention what we've been studying. It's not even recapping. I think it's good, because it's like I like to keep in mind the themes. And they're so big and broad, they're worth contemplating on a daily basis. Important. In that day the Lord with his sore and great and strong sword shall punish Leviathan, the piercing serpent. Beriach, fleeing. Leviathan is Leviathan. Like, literally the word in Hebrew is Leviathan. Hebrew is where we get the word Leviathan from. So this is actually a transliteration. The word, I'm sorry, I forget that I only get to see that little pop-up window. If you've ever been to, go visit BibleHub.com and go to visit the King James Version, Bless the Strongs, and then check out the cool little pop-up window that gives you the Strong's number immediately. Leviathan. Yeah, they have a actual, that's there from Leva, a wreathed animal, like a serpent. Like, you think about the way a wreath is intertwined, and then you think about the way the scales on a serpent looks, you know, as far as the way they are, look like they're interlocking, like a wreath. A serpent, especially the crocodile or some other large sea monster, figuratively the constellation of the dragon, also the symbol of Babylon. Because Babylon also, fugitive is like the Tigris and Euphrates River, where I think the fugitive river or something like that, but they were known for being crooked. They're not like, you know, they're not straight. Most rivers are crooked though, but yeah, as far as I know, but particularly, you know, they would be the big old crooked river. The Nile, I think, is, I don't know, there's got to be bends and stuff, you know, but from space it looks straight, kind of like the Mississippi. And I would say that, like, from way up, yeah, the Euphrates looks a lot more crooked than, like, say, the Nile or the Mississippi, like, from a far way off. It doesn't deviate. I mean, the deviations in a lot of rivers are really small. I mean, they here and there, a little turn, but, like, a river that really winds its way through things, like, far and wide, is another thing. And that's, you know, I definitely think that, like, that's the difference between several different rivers. Like, if I think about rivers, like, when I think about the creeks that run through my area, because we're way up high, I mean, as far as Illinois goes, and we're at the top, we're 1,000 feet above sea level, or I think we're at 1,800 where I'm at. And, you know, and so the creeks all begin up here, and they're very winding. They wind their way across the countryside. It's very beautiful to look at. And they kind of go here and there, and it's weird because they go west and east, and it's hard to tell which way they're flowing and towards what. But, you know, you can look at a map and find out. But, so that refers to the Euphrates with the city of Babylon being situated on the river. And so, yeah, it symbolizes Babylon too. And of course, that's fine, because Babylon is an important symbol of the book of Revelation. Mystery Babylon is married to the Antichrist. And the Antichrist is, at least in the spirit, the dragon. Or at least spiritually supported by the dragon. I mean, it's hard to say exactly, because when you have these things given in symbolic things, like, I think the two witnesses could refer to all kinds of people. But, you know, I mean, like, it doesn't have to be two individuals, like Moses and Elijah, two stars. It's the two candlesticks, not the two stars. And that reason is important, because the candlesticks are the churches. They are not the angels of the churches. They are the churches themselves. So, as the two witnesses are portrayed symbolically as just these two individuals, it seems, or that's the easy reading. I mean, it doesn't say not to, but that's what it is. But so also Antichrist, conversely, I almost feel like Antichrist could be something that is split up into multiple things, like the beast, the false prophet, and the dragon, but really he's just one. And that those are just aspects. Kind of like Satan's modalistic, like he's a modalistic Antichrist. I don't know. That's a thought. It's not a pronouncement, by the way. It's just something to consider. Okay. And the future servant, even Leviathan, crickets, and dragons in the sea. Yep. We'll leave it that way for now. Dragon, I didn't look up, but and that'll be the last thing we do here. Wait, dragon. I wonder what the word. I know in Greek they have the word drakon because dragon comes from Greek. Unless they got it from some other language, in which case, like it's Hebrew. Nope, tanim, a serpent, a dragon, sea monster. Okay, it's another word for the big lizard. Okay, so that'll do for now. We'll pick it up with verse 2 on Monday, and until then, have a nice weekend. Say your prayers, eat your vitamins. And I'll see you on Monday.
In that day I'll be with his sword, and great and mighty sword shall punish Leviathan. That great and mighty sword shall punish Leviathan. That crooked serpent, and he shall slay that crooked serpent, and he shall slay the dragon.